Have you ever felt your world collapse in just 3 words? I can't do this anymore. That's what popped up on my phone's screen one Thursday afternoon. I was in the living room, prepping the chalkboard for the next morning's classes, when my phone buzzed with a message notification. My heart sped up before I even saw his name. Chris. I opened the app, and there were the coldest, clearest words I've ever read. Emily, I can't do this anymore. Goodbye. It took me a moment to recognize the dull weight of that phrase. Silence fell over me, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. My breath caught. It felt like I'd been flung out of myself, drifting adrift. I took a deep breath. Breathe, Emily, breathe, I told myself, repeating the mantra to keep from breaking down in tears. But anger arrived before the tears. Every beat of my pulse sounded like war drums, reminding me of all the sleepless nights, the dreams we shared that, in a second, turned to dust. He had the nerve to send this without looking me in the face. I thought. That message wasn't just a goodbye. It was a precise strike, delivered by someone who no longer saw me as a partner. I set the phone aside and ran my hand over my lips, almost tasting the metallic shock. There, alone in the silent living room, I promised myself this wouldn't end there. But in that exact moment, my chest burned with unanswered questions and a fierce desire to turn the tables. Seconds after reading goodbye, my gaze darted to the corner of the table where I'd left the tablet open to my banking app. With trembling fingers, I swiped the screen to check the balance, and my stomach knotted. The zero staring back wasn't a connection error or a bug. It was irrefutable proof that Chris had drained every cent from our joint account. Nothing left. Our funds to renovate the kitchen, the reserve for my education conference in New Orleans, even the money we'd saved for that weekend getaway in Fredericksburg. Everything vanished in the blink of an eye. A wave of panic washed over me, followed by a heat so fierce it hurt my skin. How could he do this? I thought, my hands clenching into fists. For a moment, I imagined smashing the tablet against the wall, screaming my despair at the ceiling. But something inside me whispered, wait. I carried the device to my desk and leaned on one arm, feeling my elbow sink into the cold surface. I focused on steadying my breath, slow inhales through the nose, steady exhales through the mouth, a simple method I used to calm the whirlwind of thoughts before a tough lecture. As my heart tried to settle, I mentally revisited the last few weeks, the small transfers he made, always justified by late bills or last-minute investments. I never suspected it was part of a plan to leave me stranded. That night, instead of sleeping, I stared at the ceiling to the tick-tock of the wall clock. I found myself combing through every penny I'd ever spent on that app, coffee, subscriptions, birthday gifts. It was as if my financial life had been erased in an instant. He's not getting away with this, I whispered, feeling my resolve crystallize. There, lying in the dark, I decided to use this apparent defeat as fuel. It was time not to retreat, but to plan my silent revenge. Adrenaline ran through me. His victory would be nothing but fuel for my strategy. And in the days to come, while the world slept, I'd be busy mapping out my own comeback. In the days that followed, every time Chris claimed another late bill or emergency, my brain noted the pattern. While keeping up my usual routine, morning classes, afternoon test prep, my mind buzzed with strategies. I needed to protect myself and act with surgical precision. I began discreetly researching a financial institution that offered online account opening with minimal questions. One night, after locking my bedroom door and confirming the hallway lights were off, I registered my social security number and my maiden name, creating a backup account in a few clicks. I picked a branch outside my neighborhood to minimize any trail leading back to me. Next, I planned the transfers. Instead of sending everything at once, which would surely trigger internal alarms, I opted for small installments, like paying a recurring service. I moved modest amounts at different times, some in the early hours of the morning, others late in the afternoon when I was checking school emails. Each transaction arrived as a discreet notification, with the silent satisfaction of reclaiming control. I remember one specific night. Me at my desk, only the monitor's glow lighting my face as I typed in the new account numbers. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of knowing that with each send, I took back a bit of the power he'd stolen. Soon, the small transfers added up to a substantial sum, and I began sleeping better, even with my heart still pounding. There was no longer that absolute void in the joint account. Now, there was a reserve, born of my determination and caution. Each time I opened the app and saw that growing balance, I felt a thread of hope and pride. In the same week Chris thought he'd pulled off the perfect heist, I was already gearing up for a twist he never saw coming. And as the sun rose over Austin, I brewed my coffee and mentally noted the next steps. Keep the secret, shore up the reserve, and wait for the right moment to deliver the final blow. After all, a successful revenge isn't born of impulse, but meticulous planning. And mine was just beginning. One morning, I received an unexpected email from Chris, a photo of the joint account statement hanging on our kitchen fridge as if it were a victory trophy. He added a sarcastic caption, "Look how bright your future is," without a single cent in sight. My stomach churned again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was pure curiosity. I opened the backup account app and checked the balance. Untouched, growing with every covert transfer I had made. A tight smile curved at the corner of my lips. He thought he had left me completely vulnerable. Little did he know I hadn't depended on that joint account for a long time. While he was gloating, I noticed something even more important in the screenshot of the statement. A small note he'd scribbled in the footer, in tiny letters, complaining about mysterious charges showing up as bank fees. It was proof that he didn't even pay attention to his own statement. He was obsessed with the idea that he'd financially ruined me. In that moment, I realized the greatest advantage was on my side, his blindness. Chris was certain he controlled me, but in reality, I was the one steering the financial narrative. While he focused on the void he'd created, I was quietly building my independence. I took a moment to absorb this turn of events. I thought about replying, but decided that my next moves would speak louder than any text message. I saved the fridge photo as a private trophy and closed the banking app with a feeling of being one step ahead. That afternoon, while jogging in the park, I felt a mix of relief and excitement. Finally, the tide had turned. The power play was no longer his to wield, but mine. And from that point on, every new move would be carefully plotted to show Chris that beneath the apparent shock, I was steady and undefeated. I decided it was time to carry his humiliation beyond the walls of our home. Chris needed to feel the sting in front of the people whose opinions he valued most. I pictured my steps like chess pieces. Each move needed to be discreet, but merciless. I began by gathering old donation documents I'd made years before, under my maiden name, for a local children's education NGO in Houston. Among receipts and confirmations, I chose a symbolic amount large enough to cause a stir. Next, I created an anonymous email, using a convincingly fake domain. It looked like it came from a reputable charity. I attached the receipt and wrote something brief but impactful. On behalf of Emily Roberts, we thank you for the generous donation arriving at such an important time for our cause. I scheduled the send for a strategic hour, right after Sunday breakfast, when his family usually exchanged messages in their WhatsApp group. Then I hit send and shut down my computer, pretending it was an ordinary Sunday afternoon. A few minutes later, I heard the ping on my phone, notifications popping up in the Roberts family group. I read messages of surprise, questions, even applause emojis for the supposed philanthropist to be congratulated. My heart raced, not out of pleasure for his pain, but from the thrill of seeing my plan in action. Meanwhile, over at his house, I assumed, conversations grew tense. I imagine his mother probably calling his sister, trying to understand how Chris, known for pinching even coffee money, made that generous donation without telling anyone. And I, across town, breathed a sigh of relief knowing that, for the next few hours, his own last name would be remembered because of my silent revenge. The taste of victory was strangely sweet, but it also brought a twinge of guilt. I knew I was toying with other people's emotions and reputations. Still, I stood firm. If Chris wanted to play dirty, I would answer in kind, while maintaining absolute control of my narrative. The game wasn't over yet. After all, the checkmate would come at the right moment. That Sunday afternoon, when my phone buzzed that morning with messages from the Roberts family group, I knew my plan had worked. But the real show happened a few hours later, when, unaware, Chris walked into the living room and grabbed the tablet to show his mother, proud and confident, thinking he could finally humiliate me. He displayed the statement of the donation full screen, gesturing to his grandmother, who frowned in confusion. "Did you do this?" she asked, pointing to the highlighted amount. Chris let out a nervous laugh and replied, "Looks like Emily surprised me again." It was there, in front of uncles, cousins, and family friends, that the mood shifted. Some congratulated the philanthropist, others exchanged suspicious looks and whispered questions. Why didn't he know about this donation? I watched the chaos unfold from a distance, imagining each expression. His sister holding the phone, questioning in a low voice, his father crossing his arms with that look of feeling the ground slip away, and his mother, so proud to show off her grandson, now torn between scolding her son or praising the gesture. The collective discomfort brought me both relief and remorse, but I remained invisible to him, watching justice play out without leaving the shadows. As Chris tried to explain that those mysterious charges were beyond my knowledge, his voice lost strength under the barrage of questions. And in that moment, I knew the battle had truly turned. He was no longer the author of our financial story, but merely a character lost in the lines I'd written. There, in silence, I reaffirmed my strength and my resolve to keep playing by my own rules, and at the same time, felt a deep relief at having finally leveled the playing field. The next day, Chris tried to react. He sent a formal email to the bank, alleging fraud on the joint account and demanding the immediate reversal of the mysterious charges. I pictured him at home, pursing his lips, reviewing every line of the text before clicking send. To my surprise, though only up to a point, the bank replied within a few hours. They confirmed that the transfers came from an authenticated device, using my login and password, and that there was no sign of external hacking. When he read their response, his face collapsed. He had fallen into his own trap. But the coup de grace only became clear when, later that same day, Chris received a notice from a Houston NGO. They explained that they had only received an old donation made by me years ago, and that the entire new donation process was actually a system error that replicated the old receipt on the family statement. In other words, I hadn't done anything illegal. I'd simply exploited a flaw in a dumb system to turn the tables. Chris tried to accuse me of malicious manipulation, but without evidence of banking misconduct or financial fraud, his allegations dissolved like a sandcastle. He was stunned to realize that, even at the height of his arrogance, he could never prove I'd committed any crime. With the dust settled, I reclaimed total control of my financial life. I paid off my outstanding bills, bought a new car, a symbol of freedom I never imagined I'd pay for on my own so soon, and invested in myself, a specialization course in inclusive education I'd always wanted to take. Sometimes, I still get messages from relatives or acquaintances commenting on my alleged generosity. I reply lightly, keeping the mystery. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? And I move on, knowing that my freedom is worth more than any grudge. What did I take away from all this? That justice isn't always black and white. Sometimes you have to use intelligence and patience as weapons to protect what's yours. Revenge might not fill the void left by betrayal, but in my case, it restored my peace of mind and my confidence. And you? If you were in my shoes, with your account wiped clean and feeling invisible, how would you react? The story can be cruel, but often the answer lies in our ability to reinvent the game.